Hi, this is Kimberly. I'm a licensed professional counselor and I'm also a former middle school guidance counselor. Today in this vlog series, all about advocacy. In the first part one, I talked about the process of grief and what it's like when you first get that label, if you will, when you get that label of a diagnosis and the grief process that you're going to go through. And next tip, educate yourself. Once the initial shock, that's for lack of a better word, and the initial moment passes where you realize, okay, here's a diagnosis, here's what we've got going on. Read everything that you can get your hands on about your child's diagnosis. Maybe not all at once. You can take a break from it too if you need to. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. Sometimes take it, read it, put it away, read something else for a while, maybe even reread some of the things that you've read before, and then ask questions. Ask all of the questions in the world, from the clinician or the medical professional who gave your child the diagnosis. Ask all of the questions, all of them. There's no such thing as too many questions. Ask the questions again if you're not sure and you didn't understand. Ask them to explain it to you in common terms, or what we call as layman's terms, so that, a lot of medical and technical jargon not going to help you here, especially now because you're still trying to cope and process with the fact that your child is going to be struggling with managing a few different tasks or might have to learn in a different way. So ask them to help you explain it in terms that you can understand. Reports should be written in those terms anyway. I personally have had the experience where I've been given a report that wasn't, and I am a clinician, and it didn't go well. So definitely make sure that they write the report and answer all the questions in a language that you can understand clearly, and do not be afraid to ask those questions. For our house, in my experience, once we received the diagnosis of developmental coordination disorder, I felt relief. For years, I had been put off by the pediatrician, not maliciously. I think they just probably thought I was an over-anxious, overbearing, only child parent, which I can be sometimes. But I knew in my mama gut that something wasn't quite right. Something was off. So I pressed until I got the referrals that I needed for assessment. I advocated for myself and for my child until I got those referrals, I got those assessments, I got that appointment, and I got the diagnosis that I needed and the intervention that I needed. And my child is thriving because of it. Doesn't mean he doesn't have challenges, but he's doing a whole lot better. And that makes all the difference in the world. I'm going to take a sidebar here and talk about fear of labels. There's going to be another video that I'm going to make later on with living with labels without living with fear, and I'll talk more about that in another video later on. I'll talk about the pros and cons of why the label is important and why it was important for us, but I'm going to get to that in a later video. So stay tuned to my channel and definitely check in if you want to know about how to live with labels without living in fear. Back to reading everything that you can get your hands on to educate yourself and to be an advocate. I asked our occupational and physical therapy crew to give me as much information as they could about our child's diagnosis so that I could read those resources. In fact, a lot of these resources are now a part of my personal library. I use them so much and so frequently that I decided it was worth it for me to purchase them and have them on hand. And I've read them and reread them over the past 7 years of having my child in therapy. And I know I'm showing these to you really quickly, but I will put a link in the description box below for all of the different resources for my child's diagnosis of dyspraxia, developmental coordination disorder, and sensory integration dysfunction. This resource especially, though, is especially helpful because it encompasses dyspraxia, dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, ADD, ADHD, and OCD. I think the only one that's not in here is dyscalculia or dysgraphia, but this encompasses several, so this is a very useful resource as well. And I'm going to do a video, but read everything you can get your hands on. Educate yourself. Reach out and connect and get to know the Learning Differences community at large. You are going to find other fellow advocates there and other people who are willing to help you. One of the first places that I found when I was doing all of my research on my own, yes, I Googled I Googled a lot, but I was trying to find professionals who specialized in DCD. I wanted to know all that I could. It has led to me making some really great connections. I've met some wonderful friends and fellow advocates like Sue Hilly of DCD Kids. She was featured on our Salt and Light Serve Spotlight a year ago on my podcast, and her website, DCD Kids, is absolutely beautiful, and it is a light in the darkness for parents like me who have a child with a really common diagnosis, but that also has very little awareness and very little resources for it out there. It also led me to meet Dr. Priscilla Tamplain of the University of Texas at Arlington and her Developmental Motor Coordination Lab and her wonderful program of Little Mavs. I'll tell you all about this wonderful program that is not only providing a service in the community of helping parents with DCD and dyspraxia, but also collecting and providing wonderful research that is helping further the community for DCD and helping increase awareness and increase ideas of interventions, and also hopefully the goal is have insurance covered if there's more of awareness out there so that it gets properly diagnosed and has early intervention, which just helps kids in the long run. You will find that you are not alone. You are part of a bigger community. Don't be afraid to dig deeper. As a licensed professional counselor, I am required to complete a certain number of continuing education hours every 2 years to maintain my license both here in Texas and in my former home state of Georgia. So what I have done is whenever it's time to take a class, some of the hours have to be within the field of counseling, some of the hours have to be within other fields that are called related fields. So what I have done is I have taken CEUs, or continuing education units, in comparable fields such as occupational therapy or music therapy, so that I could learn more about my son's diagnosis. This does double duty for me. It helps educate me as a parent, and it helps me get my hours so that I can renew my license. One caveat I will say, you don't have to be a professional to take these workshops. There are many workshops that are out in the community that are written in layman's terms for parents to understand and to help them learn more about the diagnosis. Understood.org is one of the most amazing resources that you've got out there. Dyspraxia USA has a lot of wonderful articles out there, is the Dyspraxia Foundation USA as well. And I will put a link in the description box below. Sped Homeschool puts a lot of wonderful information out there, a great nonprofit run by Peggy Ployer, and also her wonderful podcast, Empowering Homeschool Conversations, is another place where you can find a wealth of information on the different diagnoses out there so that you can learn more about your child's diagnosis. It's a broad term. It's not going to be everything specific to your child, but it will help you get familiar with the diagnosis so that you don't have to feel so overwhelmed, so lost, and so in the dark. And it will help you gain the confidence that you need to be sure that you can ask those big questions when you go back to see clinicians or physicians, and when you need to really advocate for your child. In the early stages of our son's care, the insurance did not want to pay for a thing. So it took me really educating myself about my son's diagnosis and going to the mat for, 2 years, where I would stay on the phone for hours at a time. Eventually, I will say, I got a lot of education out of it, but I ended up having to just switch insurance companies. But I have seen parents where they've been able to go toe-to-toe and go through that appeal process with their insurance company and win those battles. It didn't discourage me from making the battle, it just encouraged me to switch insurance companies when I could. So either way, it's all grist for the mill, and I counted it all joy. It also helped me found this website, this digital content, this YouTube channel, so that I can in turn help teach you and other parents like us how to fight for themselves and fight for their kids. As you too grow in your knowledge, you too may find yourself inspired to teach other people and to advocate for your child's diagnosis as a whole. Don't be surprised if it happens. What was my family's decision when it comes to advocacy? When it comes to DCD, I am especially passionate about getting the word out. The more I learned, the more I started to recognize that not enough people were aware of this diagnosis, and that I felt I had a duty, I had a responsibility to help families and parents and children who face this diagnosis who did not have the luxuries that we had of being able to afford out-of-pocket care. And especially after I had gone through 2 years of battling insurance companies that ineffectively, they didn't work. I was unable to secure them the funding to pay for services. All I could think of was, what if I didn't have the option to pay out of pocket? What would I do? What would I do? Would I know to do more? I think because of my background in professional counseling, and I've bought with insurance companies before to get paid when I was a clinician in private practice, so I kind of had some insider information of how to go toe-to-toe to fight with them. Still didn't work, but it didn't mean I didn't fight. In many cases, it has worked with other insurance companies for parents who've just had somebody willing to help guide them. There's a lot of tips and tricks that insurance won't tell you, and they don't want you to know because they don't want you to fight. It's a money game at the end of the day. The other reason is because DCD is a really commonly occurring disorder. Statistics say anywhere from 1 in 10 to 1 in 20. Yet very few medical professionals, educational professionals, or even health professionals are familiar with the diagnosis. It's very hard to find intervention services for them. Very few kids are covered, or it's splotchy at best, depending on where you live within the United States or where you live in the world, to get educational resources to support children who attend public schools. It was one of the biggest reasons we chose to homeschool. So you can throw your hat into the advocacy ring without necessarily showing all your cards. You can do like I do and keep a few close to your chest, and you might be amazed at just how many families you impact. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for being a part of my homeschool village. Remember, the days are long, but the years are short. For when you feel the weight of those heavier days, take a deep breath and relax. You're going to get through it. It's only homeschooling. God bless.